can you amend against the Constitution that, you know what I mean, that it's already written? And that's kind of what we've done, in a sense, is create bills that attack the Constitution rather than exemplify it and lift it up. Does that make sense?
It does. We've seen a rubber band snapping back into the hands of a king.
Yes.
And I actually talk about that in the book as well. For example, 500 years ago, Italy was a bunch of city-states. Venice, Genoa, Naples, Florence, Siena, and they always fought. And Machiavelli thought if one prince could control all of Italy, all these city-states, it would stop the infighting. So his end was good. And so he said any means necessary to get there is justified. The ends justifies the means. So if a king or a prince conquered a city in his quest to unify Italy, the people would hate him. But if the prince paid criminals to kill cows and burn barns and create crisis and terror, the people would cry out for help. The prince would come in and kill the very criminals he bribed. Nobody would know the better for it, and everyone would praise the prince as a hero. So it's good marketing. Jeez. You create the need and fill it.
You hearing this?
You go around the back of the house. Go around the back of the house, set it on fire. Then you go around the front of the house and sell them a fire extinguisher. And they'll pay anything for it and even thank you for being there. So it's called Machiavellianism, where you create or capitalize on a crisis to consolidate control. So in times of crises, people will knee-jerk reactions, surrender their freedoms to somebody promising to restore security, and that the rubber band snaps back.
You hearing this? Because that's what happens. Gun control. Someone's a big old thing, and all of a sudden, we got to give up gun control. And then they use these crazy statistics, like 91% of the people are for gun control. It's like, yeah, you took a poll of 1,200 people, probably downtown Chicago. You know what I mean? That's kind of what happens now. It's like whenever a crisis happens, there's the big government ready to we're going to bring order and restore it. We just have to give up your liberty. No big deal.
And so that Machiavelli's idea influenced someone in Germany in the early 1800s named Hegel, Hegel. Mm-hmm. And Hegel basically turned it into a triangle. A thesis on one corner, an antithesis or antithesis on the opposite corner, and then on top it's a synthesis. Sounds complicated, but it's not. You start off at the thesis, you create the antithesis. In other words, you create a crisis that's really bad, and then everybody's happy to settle for your answer that's half as bad. Then this synthesis becomes a new thesis, and then you create another problem that's real bad, and everybody's happy to settle for your answer that's half as bad. And you keep creating crisis and crisis each time people surrender a little more freedom, and you move across the page from the people ruling themselves from the bottom up all the way to a king ruling from the top down.
Yeah.
And so this Hegelian dialectics was adopted by Karl Marx. And he says, how do you create the antithesis? You send in agitators, agent provocateurs, provoking agents, community organizers, labor organizers. And their goal is to find people with grievances, and you stir them up, and you say, you've been wronged, you want what they have, follow me, you'll get it. And you end up creating riots, and then people in the insecurity that follows, everybody's willing to say, whatever the government takes to restore order. And then the government takes away your guns and takes away your rights. 45 countries fell to communist dictators this way. And so they would organize the proletariat versus the bourgeois, which is the working class against the business owners. They would organize the blacks against the whites, the Catholics against the Protestants, the Muslims against the Christians, the Hutus against the Tutsis in the Congo and Rwanda. They really don't care who the two sides are. They just want to stir up a crisis, and then when it gets out of hand and everybody feels insecure, everybody's willing to surrender their freedoms to somebody promising to restore order, and the rubber band snaps back and you get a king. And believe it or not, this is how the British took over India. Hundreds of kingdoms, they reached an equilibrium for centuries. Britain comes in and gives one kingdom guns, gives another kingdom guns, stirs up ancient animosity so they fight each other, and then Britain comes in and conquers both. And they do this again and again and again until they took over all of India. They tried doing it in America, where they came in and gave guns to the Indians and said, look, if you scalp the Americans on the frontiers, and so we end up seeing this intentional story. And this is what the KGB would do. Come into countries, find people with grievances. I hate to admit it, but Eisenhower approved the overthrowing of the president in Iran, Mossadegh. It was called Operation Ajax. because he was leaning toward the Soviet Union.
No.
And so this was the first plan where our CIA went into Iran, found people who had grievances against Mossadegh, stirred them up, gave them guns, right, and then they threw them out and we installed the Shah. And so basically, we are today experiencing these tactics done on our own soil
Yeah.
that have been done on other countries' soil. So people are coming into neighborhoods, finding people with grievances, stirring them up, bringing about riots and so forth. And then in the confusion, they're saying, we need the government to come in and take away everybody's freedoms, everybody's guns, everybody's rights. You can't speak if it offends somebody. And before you know it, their goal is to have power go from the people into the hands of a dictator.